Yes, it's time for yet another Supra video. Hi, my name is Eric. I love to do videos on high-performance sports cars and that kind of stuff. If you like that, go ahead and hit subscribe. Now, you might have noticed I don't only make Supra videos. I've expanded my repertoire lately, and if there's another car that you want to see, go ahead and hit me up on Instagram. I want to take a moment to address the fanboys, because apparently the Supra is a giant fail and it doesn't make enough power. So let's see what's actually going on with this car. So recently, Car and Driver, a journalist by the name of David Beard, took the Supra and took it in for a dyno test. So we're going to look at those numbers and see how the Supra actually stacks up and how it compares against what Toyota promised us. So a quick recap, Car and Driver did a 0 to 60 test a couple days ago. It did 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds and a quarter mile speed of 12.3, 113 miles per hour. That's pretty darn fast by any measure, especially for a car that costs about $50,000 US. I did a video on that last week. If you want to see it, it's linked right up here. So that 0 to 60 time is actually faster than the BMW M2 competition. Now, if you're familiar with that car, it has the S55 engine from BMW, of course, which makes 405 horsepower. So that is the M engine. What's in the Supra is just the lowly B58 engine, although it is a new version of the B58 that has been modified especially for the new Supra. And there's also a variation being used, I think, in the X5, BMW X5. Toyota says that the car makes 335 horsepower, 365 pounds-feet of torque, and the car weighs about 3,400 pounds, although Car and Driver measured it at the same time they did the 0 to 60 testing, and they found that it was about 25 pounds lighter than what Toyota claimed, and they're talking about the fully loaded version. So the stripped down, the base version is probably, I'm just gonna hazard a guess, maybe another 25 to 50 pounds lighter, bringing the car down into maybe the 3,350 range, something like that. Now, if the new Supra is too expensive and you're looking for a used car, I actually really like Autotempest.com. It's kind of like an online shopping mall where you can browse major car websites like eBay Motors, Cars.com, and so forth. And of course, Autotempest is graciously sponsoring this video, so I definitely recommend you check them out. They're gonna be in the link down below, especially if you're looking for a used car. Now, there's a number of factors that go into the acceleration of a car. One of the first ones, of course, is available traction. Now, the things that you're dealing with there, of course, are the tires, how warm the tires are, the temperature, what the road surface is like, so forth. Typically, an all-wheel drive car is going to have an advantage because you're able to put down the power through all four wheels and obviously distribute the power and torque among 4 tires as opposed to just 2. There's a couple other factors that go into it as well. One of them obviously is horsepower and torque, but another factor no one really seems to talk about, at least here on YouTube, is gearing. So all these things go into acceleration. It's not just horsepower. Of course, the weight of the car is a big factor too, especially when you're getting the car off the line. A lighter car inherently is going to have less mass to move, so it's going to be a little bit quicker to get off the line, all other things being equal. So just for some perspective on that 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds for the Supra, the BMW 340i, which has the B58 engine, although an earlier version of it, that car does 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, according to Autoblog, and it weighs about 3,555 pounds, so it's heavier. It's a car with 340 horsepower. The 2018 Audi S3, 292 horsepower, about 3,450 pounds, about 4.6 seconds 0 to 60, according to Car and Driver. I have that car, I have the 2016, and I've done some testing on it, and that's about right. Here's a car that so many people in the comments really love to say is a competitor for the Supra, is way better than the Supra because it costs less and it has the same power. I bet you can guess it's the Nissan 370Z, which, by the way, is a 10-year-old car, and Nissan has no plans of updating it as far as I can tell, so that sucks because I like Nissans. That car has 332 horsepower, 270 pounds-feet of torque, 0 to 65.2 seconds in a manual, according to Motor Trend, and the quarter mile 13.7 at 103 miles per hour. Definitely not as fast. All right, the Camaro V6, the 1LE, it has 335 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, weighs about 3,500 pounds, quarter mile about 13.7. This is according to 0 to 60 times.com. Okay, so we're talking about cars that have similar horsepower numbers. They're a little bit heavier, but all of these other cars are less expensive than the Supra, I think. If you want to go a little bit up in the price bracket, the Corvette, the C7 Corvette, the current one, is definitely going to be faster. It weighs about the same as the Supra, and it has 460 horsepower, no question, but the base price of that car is about $7,000 higher. The C8 Corvette, which is coming out soon, July 18th, I'll be at the media event. That we don't know how much it's going to have, but speculation is 500 to 530 horsepower. Definitely going to be faster. We're talking a lot more money too, probably at least $12,000 more than the Supra. Also in the more expensive category, and the target for the Supra, of course, is the Porsche Cayman S. That car has 350 horsepower, and with an automatic transmission, 0 to 60 about 3.9, and it's lighter than the Supra by about 200 pounds, but it costs $74,000 in that configuration. Somebody, of course, mentioned the Camaro ZL1, which I don't think is a competitor at all. It's a completely different car. It weighs about 4,000 pounds. Not a knock against that car, it's freaking awesome. 650 horsepower. Base price on that car is $64,000. It's definitely gonna smoke the Supra in any acceleration test you can possibly imagine. So keeping all that in mind, it seems like the Supra might be making a little bit more power than Toyota has stated. Here's what the car and driver test numbers showed. 339 horsepower, 427 pounds-feet of torque. That is a lot of torque. So these numbers sound kind of close to the Toyota numbers, right? Especially the horsepower 339. But let me tell you why it's actually a whole lot higher. The manufacturer of any automobile calculates horsepower at the crank. So that is before the transmission. Essentially, they calculate it with the engine on a stand, not mounted in the car, but with all the emissions equipment and so forth, and they calculate horsepower at the crank. So what you got to deal with when you're looking at a dyno, a dynamometer, is wheel horsepower. That's the only way you can really measure it, is at the wheel. And obviously going through the drivetrain, primarily the transmission and the differential, you're going to have driveline loss or drivetrain loss. Now historically it's been calculated at about 15 to 17%, maybe back in 2010. Clearly modern cars are more efficient, and it's really hard to figure out what an exact number is. There's a lot of variables, and it's actually really difficult to calculate what a driveline loss is, but you're dealing with all kinds of different friction, you're dealing with heat, you're dealing with the viscosity of the oil and all kinds of other factors. So it's difficult to calculate. So if we figure the engine is making 400 horsepower and we calculate a 15% loss, that's about 60 horsepower, we get 340 horsepower. So it seems realistically that the Supra is making about 400 horsepower. Torque, 427 at the wheels. This is actually pretty insane. This is way higher than the stated number of 365 pounds-feet of torque from Toyota. If you figure 500 pounds-feet of torque and a 15% loss, that's about 75 horsepower. That gets you down to about 425. So it seems possible that the Supra is making as much as 500 pounds-feet of torque at the engine. That is nuts. So Car and Driver tells us that the torque converter on the car doesn't actually lock up fully until higher RPM. So there's a little bit of slippage, and that might induce a slightly higher number measured at the wheel. So it's difficult to say what that number is, but 427 is still a really, really high number. Let's put that into a little bit of perspective. I have a BMW 1M. It's a 2011. It's a one-year model run only. It's got the N54 engine from BMW. It was the last year of that engine, so it was the most highly tuned version. The numbers on that from BMW were 335 horsepower, 369 pounds-feet of torque. So essentially the same as the B58 engine that is in the Supra. I modified my N54 back in 2012 or so, and I took it to a dyno, different kind of dyno. We're talking about a Mustang dyno, which always shows lower than a Dynamax, which is, or rather a dyno jet, which is what the Supra was tested on, I believe. And the numbers that I got were 390 wheel horsepower and 430 pounds-feet of torque. So what we're looking at is the new Supra with the B58 engine, essentially putting down the same numbers as my modified BMW 1M from a few years ago, putting these kind of modified numbers down in a brand new car. So we can only imagine what the aftermarket is going to have in store for us with this car. It seems to me that 500 horsepower on the stock internals, and probably just with some bolt-ons, is well within reason. Maybe just the tune, maybe a different, maybe some other components that the aftermarket's going to come up with. The intercooler is integrated onto the top of the manifold, so that's probably not an option, but certainly a bigger turbo is an option. And there's a company in Europe that's making about 700 horsepower right now on the B58. There's going to be other improvements too, including tuning and exhaust and so forth. So I think it's possible that we might be able to see 500 engine horsepower. I'm not sure what the wheel horsepower will be, coming out of the Supra on stock internals. So according to all the fanboys on the internet who have been commenting on my video and pretty much every other video on the Supra online, the car is a massive fail. And my favorite one, it's apparently a gay fail. Is that like an insult? I think that guy thinks it's an insult. I'll just let you in on that little secret right there. I've got even more proof that this car is a massive, massive fail. In Australia, where the car costs 95,000 Australian dollars. That's a lot of money for the top model. If you add some tax on, about 100 grand. A lot of money. Toyota says that they are gonna auction off the first 100 cars because there's so much demand for it. So, big fail. Yep. Apparently, nobody wants the car. It's not going to sell. It's just a complete disaster. What a bummer. A mega, mega, mega fail. I'm totally gloating here, but hey, I'm gonna get a Supra at some point, hopefully around August. I bet you can guess what color it's gonna be, but comment down below if you already know. I've played it out on Instagram quite a few times. If you want to come chat about Supras and other cars, I've got a Discord chat that's going to be linked down below. I definitely want to thank my Patreons who help make this channel possible. They're listed up here on screen. Thank you so much. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, there's another two. Just pick one right over here. My name is Eric. Guess what? I'll see you in the next video.